So, if you think you can handle this discussion, here's the challenge for you. Take a piece of paper, keep one for yourself, hand one to your partner. Write down the number, the percentage of which you believe you contribute the effort to the relationship. So, the two of you would be 100%. What percentage do you believe is the effort you contribute to the relationship? Have your partner do the same. And if you think you can handle it, look at the numbers together. So what do you think the answer is going to be? Now, just to put this into a little bit of perspective, keep like the outside pieces out, right? Like this isn't about who's doing the laundry, who's doing the dishes, who's taking out the trash, who's cleaning, vacuuming the floors, feeding the dogs. Like this is literally just about the amount of effort you put into the relationship. So keep that part separate. So go ahead and do that. And if you think you can handle it, take a look at the numbers. Now, I'm sure you can believe and I'm sure you can imagine that when these numbers are added together, yours and your partner's, they're going to equal over 100%. Now, obviously, that's not technically possible, right? Like if you're fully calibrated, one of you might be 55 and the other might be 45. But the odds are that you can see what you put into the relationship better than your partner can. And likewise, you see what you put into the relationship better than what you see your partner putting into the relationship. Why do you think that is? Exactly. Because you're a witness to everything that you do. You know your activities, you know your energy, you know your output. And because you're a witness to what you do, you tend to be biased into thinking that you are doing more than somebody else in any particular situation. So one of the things I love about the book Give and Take is that it gives a ton of examples and stories, real life, where this is happening and how it's affected people. A great story in this one is with Jonas Salk and the polio vaccination. You think I could be able to say that in the year 2020. And we're not really going to go into that right now because that's a video all in and of itself. Check out the book if you want to read more about giving and taking in that particular scenario. What I found was really interesting is that he starts to compare this also to George Meyer, again in The Simpsons. Like Jeff Simpsons versus polio vaccination. Like how in the world can we even compare which story we're going to talk about? Well, we already mentioned the George Meyer yesterday. And let's go back to the initial challenge. Write down, make a list of how you contribute and how your partner contributes in the relationship. So now we've written down the number. Now write a list. Write down what it is that you contribute and how your partner contributes. Okay, so George Meyer. Believe it or not, George Meyer actually invented several words in the English language. Simpsons has brought many words to the English language that we didn't have before. And come to find out, as they were determining where some of these words came from and how they were invented and interviews were being had, turns out George Meyer invented the word meh. Who knew? Meh came from The Simpsons, and who knew that George Meyer invented it? He didn't. So as they were interviewing different writers for The Simpsons, several writers pointed and said, I think George Meyer brought that one in. I'm pretty sure George Meyer came up with that. When they asked George Meyer, he said, I don't remember coming up with that. Like that doesn't cross my mind. And as they went through and had the conversation, he was all of a sudden like, oh, yeah, you're right. I kind of do now. I kind of do remember it. So if you've paused and you've made the list, now make it again. This time, let's think about a coworker, maybe a working relationship. And what I want you to do this time is actually make the list from the opposite perspective. The opposite perspective being, I want you to list down what the other people have contributed first, and then list what you've contributed. Believe it or not, in any relationship, when you do it this way, you actually end up seeing almost a doubling in the output of the other side. So let's say initially you thought you were part of 70% of the contributions to the relationship. And that means the other side was 30. So if you begin the list in this way, the other side actually jumps up to about 60 and you to 40, because we're taking the responsibility and looking at it from a slightly different perspective. When we notice other people's accomplishments, when we pay attention to other people's accomplishments, and when we put ourselves into a group mindset where we realize that we are a part of the whole and contributing to the whole, and really it's the end result that matters, that's when our perspective starts to look at a particular situation and say, oh, yeah, sure, I had a great big part in helping that be successful, but so did many other people. So, interesting piece, and I'm going to throw a little picture of this into the comments. Interesting piece is that this also brings apart psychological safety, is that when you're having these discussions in a large group, and when people realize that outside perspective and that group mindset starts to bring together a feeling of safety, then they're actually more willing to make mistakes too. Thought that was a pretty cool add-in as far as building trust in your organization. So, the founder of LinkedIn wrote in the book, even when people are well-intentioned, LinkedIn founder Reid Hoffman says, they tend to overvalue their own contributions and undervalue those of others. So givers don't actually add up their own contributions. They're just doing it to make the group a better group. Matchers like to see evenness of contribution. Takers write down all of their own and often miss the contributions of others. I'm standing in front of these Christmas cards today because I had a friend actually post yesterday that they were a little surprised sometimes by who sent Christmas cards to them and who didn't, based on who they sent Christmas cards to and who they didn't. And that really made me think about the book, right? Like, I was like, whew, like, would a giver have made that list? Would a giver have even noticed? A matcher might have noticed. A taker would have noticed it and been bitter about it. But let's think about like how we expect responsibility bias in our lives to change our perspectives on things. So like the amount of energy that we put in, the amount of responsibility that we had in a particular project, and how we see our own contributions often affect how we explain it to others and how we evaluate and grade relationships in our lives. So a little bit more on this tomorrow because it talks about how we can shift that perspective and the methods that we can do to change that. So talk to you more then.